Hello and welcome to your award-winning The Reasons I'm Broke podcast, bringing you the reasons we're broke every single week through news and headlines ranging from comics, movies, TV, video games, and more. I'm Daniel, and this week we have straight out of the Ronin console, it is Millennial Mike. Welcome back, Millennial Mike.
Glad to be here for the BROSCARs event, the most anticipated cinematic award ceremony of the year. And there's only a few that anyone cares about, if any. So I'm very humbled to be a part of this.
This is the fourth ever BROSCARs Award. It is the one that everyone talks about. I know there are lesser award shows throughout the year. Last year, I don't believe we were able to do it due to the number of non-releases that came out due to the pandemic, but it is coming back this year, and we are going to leave that towards the end, right before the BROCAP block. But if this is your very first episode, the way we format it is we go through a small block of news this week since we are focusing on the BROSCARs. Then we head on over and finish off with the BROCAP block, which is what Millennial Mike and I have been doing this week since you last heard us. So let's jump right in and explore sector number 502. After Big Bad Amazon phased out ComiXology Reader last month, the move faced a lot of backlash from readers and comic creators. Issues from this move included poor image resolution, problems with book downloads, unreadable books through Kindle, and entirely missing ComiXology original titles. The company started to roll out improvements to the US and the UK, but other territories are still waiting. It got so bad that some creators are considering publishing their digital issues through other online retailers moving forward. We've seen a lot of synergy with companies over the last couple of years. You might even be able to talk a little bit about Crunchyroll and some of the changes that they've been doing lately. But anytime companies come together like this, there's a lot of growing pains, sometimes just pains where companies will not improve based on what they previously had. So it could be that the Amazon Reader might be worse than the ComiXology one. And even though they promised changes, a lot of readers are pretty upset.
Amazon owned ComiXology for a while, though, correct?
Correct. They bought up ComiXology and kind of let it operate on its own while taking in the income, but now they want to put it together with Amazon's Reader.
Kindle is extraordinarily lucrative. It's the reader. It's the book reading platform. I was even actually thinking about purchasing a Kindle lately because it would be very convenient to be able to read on the go. And, I do want to get kind of back into reading. I've been buying some physical books, but now I'm like, I have all these books laying around. So, but no, I definitely think this is a natural progression, I think. Now, the fact that the app isn't working properly, that kind of stinks, but I don't recall really being like head over heels for the ComiXology app either.
Me neither. I am absolutely a physical reader, and I don't know if I'm in the minority or not. I don't know what the readership lies as far as when it comes to reading it on your phone or your tablet, computer, and then having a comic book or a graphic novel, manga included, right in front of you physically. So I was never one to try it out. I did try it on my phone. I tried it out on an iPad as well, and something about having a physical book, to me, just connects me further to the story and to the artwork. So I am not the readership. I am not a user of ComiXology. I do sympathize, though, with some of these readers who do rely on ComiXology or some of these digital apps as their weekly reading, and suddenly that format that you're using is low resolution. Imagine that, like suddenly your comics, like you go and pick up your comics at the comic shop and everything's kind of blurry a little bit. Like I don't have that problem as a physical reader, which is nice.
Yeah, comics even more so because they've always been kind of frail, kind of flimsy, books in general, but especially with the colored pages, and sometimes the gloss isn't that great. It's not just black and white, standard books. So they don't seem to last as long, as a standard hardcover book or something like that. But I think that if they do end up fixing the Kindle app, I think because the Kindle Reader is really good. I mean, it's got a lot of accessibility features in there. It's been well tested and it just works really well. It's got a lot of functionality. It's one of the better readers that you can get. If they could get the comics to work seamlessly in there. And one thing I really liked about ComiXology was actually their panel to panel option. So you could double tap on a panel, it'll zoom into that panel, and you can hit next, and it'll just go straight from panel to panel instead of having to, glance over the entire page. So if they could also kind of integrate those kinds of things into Kindle, I don't know if they have that already. That would be awesome. But until then, it's probably going to be one of those situations where, you merge two different apps, you don't get the best features of either app,
I might be one of those old men yelling at cloud memes at this point, but I remember when it's called like guided view.
Yeah,
you're talking about.
I like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I tried that out too on my phone and on my tablet. And where it didn't work for me is when the panels, I'd have to keep switching my device horizontally or vertically because some panels would be longer, some would be wider if it was a splash page. So it didn't have that same impact. But over the last couple of years, and this is where I had a big problem with how digital comics were affecting physical books, is for the big two, Disney and Warner Brothers, they started making their comic books digital first as a priority. So they sent out some kind of mandate to their artists saying, make sure that if you take a modern comic now, you can split the comic in half horizontally. And the reason that is because they are mandated to have X amount of panels, usually 3 to 6, on the top half of that comic page. That way it translates better digitally. So you don't have that problem as much of wider or longer panels. Instead, it'll read more naturally on a device. But when I'm reading it physically, I notice that right away. There's almost, in the very early ones, there's literally a horizontal line that goes through all the entire comic where it seems like they were giving, and I think one artist on Twitter, he was like, yeah, we were giving this format of make sure the comics fit in these blocks of text and pictures in these panels. And I had a problem with that because it restricts the artist, it restricts the writer. And then as a reader, you're reading this and you're going, okay, I'm basically reading a printed out digital comic book at this point. It's no longer where the physical book is the priority. And that's the way that books have changed, unfortunately. You don't see it as much in the independent market, which is nice. Right. They kind of just let them do their thing. But as far as DC and Marvel, those are digital books printed out.
Yeah, that feels very similar to what's happening with movies, is that there is the medium, the platform in which you consume the content does have an effect. And if you want to optimize it for a different platform, then the content itself is going to change. And I don't think we're really going to notice these differences until we have a hindsight 2020 moment and we realize, oh, snap, like, why was that different in this particular way? Oh, well, that's because, people started slowly optimize their content for digital.
And I really am like one of the loud minorities in this because I remember saying that and telling readers, regular subs at the comic shop, and they'd be like, oh yeah, I guess it is. They didn't care. They really didn't care.
Yeah.
So it is, as long as the readers aren't saying anything and they're not affected by it, then have at it. But people like me, I definitely noticed. And that's just something I have to get used to. Another thing that as the world changes, if I want to continue to consume comic books physically, I just have to accept it and be grateful for the comics that are printed physically, because a lot of these books are going exclusive to ComiXology originals or stacked, and then later they get printed for comic shops if we're lucky, and that's the only way I read them. We did have this debate come up on Twitter, and I've never discussed it as far as I remember here on the podcast, but I do want to get your take on it too, because you are an avid viewer of at least the previous Snyder films too, and I'm sure you'll be watching the new ones, I'm assuming, based on what the criteria is on how they restore the Snyderverse. But this debate comes up every couple of months, it seems like, but it really sparked lately, and it seems like a lot of bloggers, a lot of anti-Snyder comic pros especially, have been extra loud these past couple of weeks. So either it's the effect of the Batman not doing as well as they wanted, or they've heard on their end that there is a restoration coming of a certain universe. So the Jimmy Olsen death debate sparked up once again. It was the same week as Wayne T. Carr's Jon Stewart Snyder Cut appearance. I don't know if those two are related or not, but I think just the fact that Snyder is constantly trending, they find anything to bring up and kind of spark something with. So do you think that Jimmy Olsen is less relevant than what people are pretending on Twitter that he is? And it's mainly referring to that death scene in Batman v Superman where they killed off Jimmy within the first quarter of the film, And all of a sudden, all of these Jimmy Olsen fans are up in arms on Twitter to this day, supposedly, or fake outrage maybe. But do you think
Yeah.
that he is less relevant than what they're trying to make him out to be?
I think that Jimmy definitely had, Superman's best friend or whatever, definitely had a moment in the comic book, history, and a moment in the character's history and whatnot. I think that it kind of signaled a more innocent time for the character, or I would say like a more frivolous, character. Yeah, I guess you could say the word innocent would work. Time for the character and for the story. Of course, not that the comics and whatnot didn't have their own vices at the time. I'm not going to say that the Golden Age Superman was necessarily, squeaky clean in every regard, but I don't think that it's just one of those situations. People like the idea of Jimmy Olsen more than they like the character himself.
Yep.
People like the idea of Superman more than they like the character himself. And I think even more than that, people hate the idea of Zack Snyder more than they actually hate his movies.
Right.
So, it's not really a matter of whether their characters have been defiled or not. It's just more of a matter of who gets to defile them. If it's James Gunn or if it's Matt Reeves or whatever, Todd Phillips or whatever, doing their dark, edgy take of whatever character it is, completely fine to push it as far as, as they see fit.
Mm-hmm.
But when it's Zack Snyder, it grosses them out for some reason. So yeah, it's definitely a little bit of fake outrage for sure.
And we saw that especially lately with the garbage bag Riddler. Looks nothing like the comic book Riddler, but silence on it. Oh, it's very original and they're taking chances on it. And then we see Jon Stewart nearly completely 100% comic accurate, but he's wearing the ring on the quote unquote wrong finger. And that is like a huge issue all of a sudden. So we're seeing a lot of the hypocrisy here of if you were to take a time machine or a multiverse machine and just simply switch out the directors, where let's say it was James Gunn or Matt Reeves that had killed off Jimmy Olsen, we probably wouldn't hear about it at all. It's like you said, it's because of Zach doing it. No matter how great or bad it is, they will have a narrative against it. And I do want to make it clear, I do like Jimmy Olsen, but I don't have an issue with what they do in that movie. So for example, let's say in Pedo Squad, I didn't watch that one. I don't like what they did with a lot of those characters, and I simply won't watch it. Now, will I be vocal about it on Twitter? Of course, because now we're giving them, at least I think, I have the energy to give them a taste of their own medicine, the same way that they treated the Snyderverse in 2016 and everything in between is the way that we're kind of like going about this. Like, okay, now let's play this game.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. I don't have the energy.
No, it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work to keep up with it and whatnot, but I don't know. I think that there is room for, because if you watch Batman v Superman and you really feel like Jimmy should have a greater part of this movie, then you clearly weren't invested in what was the big themes and the interesting dynamics that were going on in the movie. Like Jimmy probably doesn't really have much of a place in that movie, because I mean, we could probably go into this, and it's probably been gone into several times by us and other people. Lois pretty much fulfilled Superman's best friend as well as anyone else could have. Mm-hmm. So Batman v Superman's Man of Steel and Justice League doesn't need a Jimmy. For all intents and purposes, Jimmy in that movie could have been any investigative, reporter or whatever. So photographer. So I think that maybe that could be a more legitimate complaint from those people if they were being sincere. Like, why'd you have to kill him off? You didn't even have to put him in there in the first place. Like it felt kind of spiteful. And I've heard that argument before. And I guess maybe it holds some water. I've always personally liked Zach as kind of a provocateur. I like that idea about him. So yeah, if you're triggered by him, good, Yeah. Like it's not really, I don't need to defend it. Like, yeah, maybe he did do it just to ruffle your jimmies.
That's what Deborah had said in the past, that she would rather produce a film, make a film that is talked about years later than playing it too safe and have it be forgotten in 6 months, as we do see with a lot of superheroes today.
Yeah, I'm curious on how both Deborah and Zach will stay with that energy going forward, but I do agree with that sentiment. Yeah.
Last bit of news before we jump into the 2022 BROSCARs. In a Q&A with Cinema Blend, Morbius director Daniel Espinosa revealed that the living vampire exists in Venom's universe. He did say, quote, Morbius lives in the same universe as Venom. This is the universe we saw Venom exit at the end of Venom Let There Be Carnage and return to at the end of Spider-Man No Way Home. End quote. He also revealed that Spider-Man exists in that same universe, but that the director would not reveal which one. He went on to say, quote, it is my understanding that audiences will discover the answer soon, end quote. Are we pretty much in agreement that we think would be Andrew Garfield at this point? Someone that is brought back from what appeared to be a successful appearance in Disney's No Way Home?
I suppose. This whole Venomverse situation, Spider-Verse situation, hasn't been made quite as clear as the MCU, right? It doesn't seem to be quite as like everything is in the same universe, but they have like these literal universes like, hey, better pop over this universe to, do this or that. The thing about it is I don't really, and this is something that I've heard a lot of pro Snyder people, you, me, and people that we know on Twitter and Discord and whatnot talk about how they like the idea that Andrew is part of the Venomverse and that there is a Venomverse and blah, 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 blah. But the thing is that like the only reason why these verses, quote unquote, exist is to give people the impression that there's some kind of like distinguishing lines, both in which characters can interact, but like the created, the themes, the feel, and the effects of the movies, right? And I'm not terribly convinced that, the straight up MCU Spider-Man and the quote unquote Venomverse are so unique that they even truly need to be distinguished in that way. So yeah, so that's a long answer, but they could undo it so easily, and there's nothing really distinguishing it, in my opinion.
I think one of the reasons why it has been not very clear as to where the lines are is you and I remember years when they were, okay, Spider-Man is now being used by Disney, and this was in an era where a bunch of these studios were very hesitant on characters appearing even on the big screen and on the television screen, where you can't have Deathstroke on the big screen and on Titans. They would very much restrict all of that. So from what I understand, that's one reason why they decided, okay, we're not going to give Andrew his Spider-Man, the Amazing Spider-Man 3. This will now be Spider-Man on the big screen, which was Iron Boy Jr. And that's when they continued that for several films. And meanwhile, Sony, I'm assuming went, okay, well, these are the properties we do have access to. Let's use them to the best of our ability. And if they're successes like the first Venom was, then great, we can build on that. So because of that, they didn't have that foundation of this is what we're planning on doing. Instead, they said, okay, these are the movies we plan on making. And along the way, they've kind of gone with, all right, well, Venom was big. Let's see what we can build on from there. And now he's showing up, from what I understand, in these other Disney Spider-Man movies, or at least through post-credit scenes. And they're trying to do, I'm assuming, the same with Morbius of, okay, well, Venom was a success. Let's connect Morbius to that and then see what we can do. Oh, shit. Andrew Garfield was positively received in that Disney one. Well, we have that character again, and people are okay with there being multiple Spider-Mans. Maybe we can now write a sequel where he does appear with Venom and so on. So I think that's why they're kind of going with the flow instead.
I'm very curious, actually. They're treading the line very interestingly. And I'm just as an onlooker, very curious to see how they're going to play this. I've seen a few people, probably like just one person really comment on it, in any sort of like straightforward and like in strong way on Twitter. When I was perusing on there, but I get the overall impression of the Venomverse or whatever is kind of like it's accepted and appreciated as far as it doesn't interfere with the MCU.
It seems that way.
Right. So it's like, yeah, I'm completely okay with this existing as long as all it's doing is either helping the MCU or staying out of its way, and I'll watch it, and it's not a threat, basically. So as long as that seems to be the play that Sony's making, I'm not interested because I want a competitor to the MCU. I don't want more MCU-esque or, safe bets, I would rather watch the DCJU as we have, entitled it than I would MCU ripoff content, because I don't think that they're necessarily the same thing. I think that they're both failing in their own unique ways.
I see that in several ways as far as maybe with how they're handling a lot of these movies too. I know for me, aside from the fact that they're still not MCU movies in the way that they're produced, I don't see as much humor injected to the level of the Disney ones. I do want them to succeed so that Sony can continue to use these characters and that they don't all get Disney-fied or MCU-fied if these all fail and get sold back to Disney or whatever. So
right, yeah. Ultimately, yeah, you're totally right. Like whatever they're going to do, it's best if they succeed. So yeah, I agree with that. At least that way, there's a chance that if they wanted to do something crazy, that it could theoretically happen.
One of the interesting things about how Morbius will end up doing once it releases, I have my tickets. I'm going to go see it, and I'll have a review or first impressions next week.
You have your tickets? When does it come out?
Comes out Thursday.
Oh, snap.
So Patreon, by the time this releases on Patreon this Thursday, or it's already out by the time this episode releases. And they're saying, I saw this on RT Snyder Cut promoting Morbius, and I see that connection of, okay, a Jared Leto led film, if it's a success, to me, and
that will help
assuming
his
what they
career.
were saying, it would help his career, and it helps the Ayer cut. Okay, you sell this to Discovery, Ayer or whoever is out there, whoever makes that decision of, let me pitch this to Discovery, if that talk is even still happening. I think it's already done. I think we're going to get the Ayer cut. But it shows that Discovery, that there's if you put in more Jared Leto out there, this guy is hot right now, the Ayer cut's going to be huge because there's more of him in that cut.
Yeah. No, I like Leto. I am a proponent of his Joker and an apologist thereof. That's another kind of, on principle reason why. I mean, probably one of the smaller reasons, but another reason why I do want to see the Morbius movie is because, I'm really interested in supporting him, even though that isn't enough to tip me over. The movie doesn't look offensive enough for me to skip out on it. So I'd say there's more pros than cons. So yeah, I'll be seeing this, but like I said multiple times before, this is their last chance. So
and if you've seen it, Brocat Core member on the other side, let us know on Twitter what you thought. And again, we will discuss it next week or the week after. But that does wrap up our news for this week. Now we head into the very much anticipated 2022 Best Picture BROSCAR Awards. So in previous years, we did more categories, and this year being also limited as far as releases. It's something that Bobby and I discussed, and I think some of the other co-hosts and I have also discussed on why there seem to have been less releases or less options for this. But this year we were able to put together a Best Picture category. And you might have seen it on Twitter, but there was some discussion on our end, on our private Discord, as far as the hosts, on which ones we want to include on here.
The Academy.
Yeah, that's right.
the Brocademy. The Brocademy. Yeah.
The only Academy that matters. Yeah. And it's all of you guys. So we were able to finalize this list. Bobby, Jared, Maceo, and yourself were the most active as far as the hosts on which films were going to be on here. And we did come to a consensus as far as a winner this year. So it went by votes as far as the hosts, and then from there we have a winner. But first, we're going to go through the nominations and discuss each one a little bit. So the first nominee for this year's Best Picture is Zack Snyder's Justice League, written by Zack Snyder, Chris Terrio, and Will Beall.
We live in a society where honor is a distant memory. Isn't that right, Batman?
So Millennial Mike, I want to hear your thoughts on this film. Obviously, there's a lot of background that comes on this, but just discuss it as a film itself, on why we would include this as a Best Picture nominee.
It's black and white, and I'm pretentious. 4x3, it's like, I'm pretentious. No, but I think it does a lot of things that you could argue make a film worthy of being an Oscar-nominated film. It's got some really great performances in there that really center on the like emotions and the narrative and the connection between the character. And it doesn't seem to fit into other films in this category. For instance, like will they talk about another film that's on here that is like a high art kind of film, but it kind of dabbles within a category of films that other films, it distinguishes itself. So that's usually kind of the films that are going to be noticed, are like films that are trying to distinguish themselves. So, even if it's not necessarily the best film ever made, that fact alone, is a big part of it. The 4:3 aspect ratio is very unique, and it does also play really well with the kind of large open cinematography that's being used. It's great as well if you're watching it in IMAX, which we really haven't gotten an opportunity to do, but hopefully we will in the future. The music's been restored to, its original glory, which is fantastic. I think technically it's a really well made film, lots of long single take shots, which are things that people who do award shows like. So yeah, I mean, it's fantastic. And I think most people looking at it could recognize that.
I obviously have a lot of heart and feelings behind this film, as you do as well. And I'm going to try to also discuss this simply as a regular release and as a movie. And I think you nailed it with the different things that Zach and the crew did on this film. It could have easily gone wrong if it was a less experienced crew. As far as the 4:3, I was just watching the Resident Evil films, for example, and they're solid films. They're solid movies. I would never include them in any BROSCAR nominees, but they're very enjoyable. That reminded me of that era of 3D filmmaking, for example. So there's good ways and bad ways to go about using 3D. And in this case with Zach, there's good and bad ways with going on black and white or 4:3. It's more than just setting the picture to black and white. I saw that argument a lot of, well, I can have the movie right now, black and white look, and they would turn down the saturation on their picture, but there's more to it. There's contrast adjustment. You literally have to go through every scene and do its own adjustment because not everything translates directly to black and white based on the lighting and the colors. And he went through, and the rest of the crew also went through and did that extremely well. There's not a scene in there that I think, okay, that could have used a little more sharpness, that could have used a little more shadow, darker black, or anything like that. It's technically really well, and I think even the CGI looks better in black and white. I'm not saying it looks bad in color, but it's just like you really see how well and sharp that CGI is when you see it in black and white with the different contrasts. So easily could have gone wrong. Same with the 4:3, and a lot of people didn't understand that they're not cropping out the sides. You're actually getting more picture. And
yeah, well, there's a lot of 4:3 films in the Oscars. Lighthouse was like that, and there's been several films in the past that have been 4:3 that have been nominated for Oscars. After all, people who watch 4:3 films and understand what that aspect ratio means and how a film comes to be that way are the people who attend award shows. So, it should not be lost on anyone watching the BROSCARs or the Academy or whatever. It shouldn't be lost on them what the 4:3 aspect ratio means here either. It's the same scenario. Yeah, like they didn't cut anything off. It's the actual. Obviously, we're preaching the choir here, but yeah.
Yeah, so my whole summary is so much could have gone wrong if it were any less experienced filmmaker or actor or editor. You mentioned the soundtrack. Oh my God, it's so good. I love the soundtrack. It's inspiring. It hits at the right moments, hits with the right characters. It is a very uplifting film. I don't feel this way when I watch a lot of superhero movies or a lot of movies in general. And again, a lot of that could be mixed feelings with what this movie means for a lot of us.
Yeah.
I understand that. And I could never separate that. I could never see this movie without any of that background. And that's okay. That just means that I can enjoy it right now at the level that I do. And just talking technically again, though, it is such a well-made movie. Story's very solid. We could argue about whether or not it's standalone compared to some of the other movies. But again, that's a whole different thing. It is a Best Picture nominee, one of the best movies we saw last year, and that is Zack Snyder's Justice League. Next one on this list is King Richard, nominated, written by Zach Balin.
Venus Williams, who is your best friend? You, Daddy.
Serena Williams, who is your best friend?
Venus. Then you. Then you. After Venus.
You saw this one recently. It came out on HBO Max and in theaters.
Mm-hmm.
What were your thoughts on this one as one of the best films of last year?
I mean, truth be told, I didn't see as many films last year as I may have in previous years, but this movie was really good. I recently watched it today, actually. I didn't really have a lot of expectations going into it. I usually am kind of guarded nowadays with movies going into them, which is unfortunate on a certain level. But having watched the film, it really broke through all that. And I loved Will Smith's performance, as I do with most of his performances. I really do like him. He did try to do some things that distinguished his performance in this from other performances that he might be well known for, kind of laying rest the criticism that he always plays himself in films, which I do think there's a certain degree of truth to that. Not that it's always a bad thing, but I think especially when you're talking about a film that is going in an academy like award ceremony, having a standout role that is transformative in a way is always going to catch people's eye. So I think that Will Smith kind of breaking out of his standard, style was really great. And the score was great. Some of the shots are pretty good. I'd say it's pretty par for the course. It's very uplifting and very comfortable. It hits its beats, oh, this is where, they're having a streak of wins, or, oh, this has been a crushing defeat. This is a down point. And, it's very melodramatic in that way, which is fine. It's kind of like, if I were to compare it to another Oscar award winner, I would say that it's like The Green Book. And it lightly dabbles in social issues as well, just enough to be there, but not too much to be uncomfortable, which is fine with me. So yeah, it's good. It's based on a true story. So that's also a plus.
Agreed. Very well rounded. I would say from this whole list, probably the most accessible to a general audience. I could definitely read the plot points as the story was progressing. And normally that really bugs me because it's like, all right, now I feel like I'm just going through the motions. But in this case, the performances are what kept me there. His performance, all of the young girls, his wife, like they were all really good. Sometimes when you get kids, you can tell they're acting or you can tell they're really nervous or whatever, but it felt like they were a natural family. And I don't know, I would like to see what the film process was in between takes. I'm assuming Will and everyone else were real friendly with the young girls, and they've worked with kids already for so many years, so they know how to build that relationship with a lot of these kids to the point where you can see it when they're interacting with each other. You can believe that they are really talking to their dad. And I think what they really did especially good too in King Richard is he was the main focus, even though it's about the little girls. It's about Will Smith as the character not being the perfect dad or the perfect trainer or the perfect coach. He goes through a lot of mistakes. He goes through his own learning phases, and some of which he never recovers from. You can tell that by the end, it's like, okay, he still has some of those behaviors that he may have to deal with. But when you see that kind of come around at the very end, especially when he talks to his other younger daughter on how she's not yet on that stage, like it just shows you the level of dedication that he has for his little girls, for his family, maybe a little too much. And that's what you see in here of where are his priorities when it comes to his little girls. And exploring that in the movie, I felt was awesome.
All of the character interactions were really great. They rang true to me. Like they felt real. I've seen these things before. King, Richard and his wife, the times where they were, really like in sync, the times where they were arguing and they had, little spats, how that affected the kids. Like even like when, this is not a really review, but there was a moment in there where his kids kind of witnessed how he reacted to a very severe situation and like how that kind of made impress on them. There was a lot of like non-verbal stuff that happened too. And yeah, it was, it was just a really solid movie. It was really solid for sure. I'm happy I saw it.
So congratulations again to King Richard. Next nominee for this year's Best Picture BROSCARs goes to The Last Duel, written by Nicole Holofcener, Ben Affleck, and Matt Damon.
For bearing false witness is that you are to be burned alive.
I will not be silent.
So this is one that you weren't able to see. I was able to check it out in theaters, and then it's on HBO Max now in case anyone wants to check it out, and I do encourage everyone to see it. It is directed by Ridley Scott, and this is one that it's a story type of film where about halfway through, a story is told from 3 different perspectives, and you can see how you get the truth as an audience member once you get all 3 characters' stories. And to see that unfold and to see the manipulation that goes on towards the end, it gave me a lot of suspense as I'm watching this, one as a parent, because there are some severe consequences when it comes to this medieval era of, well, if you're lying, you will be hanged. It's that kind of those time periods. But then you also see the rambunctious nature of those with power and money, which Ben Affleck and Kylo Ren, what's the actor's name?
Adam
Driver. Yes.
Driver. Yeah.
Thank you. And Adam Driver. So both their characters, when they have all this power and they feel like they can do what they'd like in a time period of seemingly less consequences, even though they're more severe, you really get to see all of that unfold, and it does make you sympathize a lot with a certain character. I thought it was fascinating just seeing and getting a movie like this, because we get them every now and again, but this one in particular, the way Ridley Scott did it, it does feel very cold in some portions and then very suspenseful. And it's not a suspense, but it's just the fact that you're seeing what these characters have gotten themselves into, and how some of these characters, even though they were introduced from one perspective at the beginning, are really pieces of shit by the time you see it from the actual character's perspective. And seeing that all unfold, and it's fascinating how it's another technical achievement where how many of these scenes that they have to do 2 or 3 different ways just so you can get the actual mannerisms and actions from these characters. When you're seeing it from Matt Damon's point of view, he's the heroic man who defends his wife and he's there for family. But then you see it from someone else's perspective, and he's doing all of this for selfish reasons and for ego. And some of these lines are even different. And it's really cool to see all of that unfold. I've seen the criticism of it's just the same movie 3 different times. It's repetitive, and it's not going to be for everyone, because it is there for you to witness the differences in each one of those stories. And it was great. I really like the performances. Ridley Scott is incredible. And the story itself is one I will not forget. Great. Absolutely. Next nominee goes to Don't Look Up, written by Adam McKay and David Sirota, and what I believe is the very first BROSCAR nomination for Netflix.
This could be a complete disaster.
This is already a disaster.
Woot woot.
We're going to have some different of opinions here, but it is a nomination for sure. So gush all over it, Millennial.
Well, that's how you take me, huh? You said you couldn't even finish it before. I was gonna ask you before the podcast, like, is that because you just didn't get around to it, or you didn't like it? But I'm starting to pick up the hints now.
I watched about 20 minutes of it and I couldn't finish it. I did not like it. So
yeah, so I actually did write a review on Vero and I think on Letterboxd about this too. But I do really like this movie. Adam McKay I like his directing style, particularly the way that all of his movies are edited. I have to actually look and see if he has the same editors doing all of the work, but that's one thing that distinguishes his movies, is that he has a lot of these quick cuts, and he does a lot of these like a montage. He has like a lot of these like montages where he has these non sequitur images, popping up on the screen. These images will appear on the screen in like very rapid fire succession, rapid fire fashion. And the thing that like ties all those images together is the theme, even though they seem to be very different. I mean, he does that in a lot of different movies, and it's really cool. The acting performances were very comical, so there was like a certain degree of energy to the film. I would say that there was no terrible performances, but there were certainly some performances that were better than others. Just the absurd nature of what's going on and the comedy style of the film really, I think, came together. I would say, as far as like the themes of the film and whatnot, I think that Adam McKay, he's done a lot of political satire and things like that. So this is very in his in his ballpark.
Mhm.
And in general, I feel as though he's been pretty nuanced in all of his takes with his different movies. In this movie, I felt like he was also pretty nuanced as well. I felt like he probably could have been more so, but in general, it's really, really strong. And I'd probably say it's my favorite of the movies that I've seen him do. The one movie I didn't watch was The Big Short. I
Gotcha.
didn't see that one, he's very well known for that one, but great movie. Definitely recommend it. And Netflix got a good one on their hands.
There you go. Goes to show you this wasn't my list. This is a collaboration from everyone. I will have to maybe go back and check it out from that perspective. I was not expecting a satire or a comedy. So when I got that, I felt like it was more of a parody film. And that's when I was completely, it's like when I watched the Snowplow movie with Liam Neeson. And I'm like, all right, this is the next Liam Neeson action film. He's a snowplow guy, but then he gets roped into and he has to use his old skills again because that's how all his movies are.
Yeah.
That ended up being a comedy, and I was really turned off by
skills.
that. Yeah.
The only set of skills that I have. Very specific set of skills.
So I had the similar experience with Don't Look Up. Amazing cast. And I remember Bobby months before this came out, he was like, look at this. And I'm like, holy shit, this cast list is incredible. Definitely checking this out. And from what I saw, I didn't feel like these actors were getting 100% out there because of just simply the circumstance of the movie.
Yeah. Some of them more than others. Yeah. I'd say, Jennifer Lawrence, she did her best, but I think Leo really saved a lot of the scene, especially when they're both there. And he really did a great job. And most of it was centered around him. So, he carried the film in a lot of ways from an acting perspective.
So congratulations to Don't Look Up, our final nominee for Best Picture of this year's BROSCARs. Some award shows do 10, something insane like that. Not here. We only do 5. I think that was one of the reasons why we first started this, when the other Academy Awards show raised it up from 5 to 10 to get ratings up, to appease movie studios, I'm assuming, so that they can get... I feel like there was one movie in particular that the previous year had not gotten nominated and people felt it should have, and that's why the next year they upped it up to 10. That's when we were like, fuck that shit. It should only be 5. And I think that's how the BROSCARs started. We were like, we're going to do our own.
Well, at this rate, everyone's, movies are going to be nominated.
Oh, yeah.
So, and then
Yeah,
you'll
we'll
have
talk about that.
extra special nominations, and then those are just the actual nominations.
Yeah. Let's discuss that in the BroCat blog for sure. I'm glad you brought that up. But our final nominee goes to Dune, written by John Spates, Denis Villeneuve, and Eric Roth.
Only together can we stand a chance.
So this one's the second one by Warner Brothers, AT&T. What were your thoughts on Dune?
Denis is my favorite director, period. I love Denis. He's great. I've almost not seen one film from him, and that's Enemy. I still haven't seen that film, but I've seen every single film from him. My favorite film that he's made was actually his first 2 films. I have a hard time picking, but I won't go too into detail with that. But this film, I think, this is like his second big try at the high art sci-fi, like the prestige sci-fi kind of film. And I think that he did a really good job. I mean, as good as anyone could do. It felt a little long when I watched the movie, and I felt as though the movie was very preoccupied in quote unquote building the world, or kind of like showing you all these interesting novel things. Oh, like this is kind of a cool, interesting little doohickey, or this is, and while it is really cool, I felt like maybe some of the interactions between the characters could have been more, like, I don't know. I don't feel connected to any of those characters. Timothée Chalamet's character, I didn't care so much about. Zendaya's character, she wasn't even in the movie very long. The music was fantastic. Hans Zimmer pretty much never really disappoints. His worst work is still pretty good. And it was shot really, really well, which now, it seems to be, I almost feel as though I am becoming a little bit, I see it so little that when I see a movie that's just shot competently, it becomes like amazing, So, but yeah, it's very, very well made. So yeah, I'm happy I saw it. Oh, another thing I have to say about this film. there's a lot of action in the film. So while it is a high art kind of prestige sci-fi film, there's a lot of fighting, a lot of sword fighting and punching and stuff like that. And all of the impacts seem to be lacking. They really feel like very, very weak. And the choreography is very overly choreographed, very, and very slow and very, it feels almost worse than when Nolan tries to take a crack at action. So, yeah, I mean, I know it sounds pretty negative. I really enjoyed it. I would see a sequel. I wish that this was a far more common type of movie. I wish high art, well produced sci-fi movies came out all the time, and we weren't even thinking a second thing about it, to be honest. But yeah, it's good.
I really enjoyed it too. I watched it back when it came out in theaters. I saw it again on HBO Max. And this is one that you're right about the choreography on the action and some of the fighting, especially when you get that vision of Timothy fighting in that war. He's flipping over like guys and all that stuff. And,
Yeah.
And you get that kind of weird CGI shot where his face was clearly placed on another body or something like that.
Yeah.
Like some of that, like there are some things here and there that you don't see
Jason
in some of
Momoa
these
is
other
fighting too is just also like whenever they he slices someone, they always put like the knife up to it and he kind of like slices, but it's just like so like there wasn't very much force in that. And I just not very believable. But yeah, go ahead. It's your turn.
Yeah, well, there was definitely a lot of... So I think those were probably some of the weaker points in the film. Maybe some of the character connections I did, like Timothy's relation... As far as... I connected with the character a lot, with his mom, especially because you get that backstory of when she's talking to her husband, there's a lot of that questioning of, are you doing this for the good of our son and for us, or for the console? And that's where she's like... She's trying to convince him. She's not trying to make the prophecy real, or she's not just doing it for him to be the one who has all of these amazing things that happen in the future, that it's because she loves her son and she's doing it for the safety. So there's a lot of that it's like, okay, that's interesting. We'll explore that maybe in a future film. There's a lot of setup for the sequels. I did really like how some of those visions that he got, and this is where that high art part comes in, were not necessarily exact futures. They were symbolic in nature. When you see him lose or die, and then you see it's symbolic of him needing to kill someone. Mm-hmm. There's that quote of you need to die yourself to kill, or when you kill, you die yourself. And that's where you see that unfold by the end of the film. You see him, the man he just killed, a future vision, what we thought of him telling him, I will show you the ways of our people or this planet. And by him challenging him in that fight, he is showing him those ways. So it's not literal futures. And that's where a lot of that was like, oh shit. It was really fascinating to see, especially on a rewatch where you really understand and get to dissect some of these things. And as you said, it's shot beautifully. Denny, you're going to get something that looks gorgeous on the big screen. And I am absolutely all in for Dune 2 and 3. I did not read the books, so I do have that. Do want to make that clear. Some people liked it and didn't like it.
Congratulations, you're free to hate or to love or anywhere in between this film based on the merit of the film alone and not the source material.
Exactly. And the fact that I liked it without having read the books and I more or less understood a lot of the themes, I think makes it that much more successful, that I was able to do that and enjoy it as someone who has no bearing or any knowledge of Dune. So they were able to translate that pretty well. I've heard that it's a very tough book or tough story to put up on the big screen. And I think Denny was able to nail it. And it was absolutely one of the best movies I saw last year. So there we go. We've got our 5 Best Picture BROSCARs nominees. And the winner for this year, I'm going to let Millennial Mike announce it. The winner for this year's Best Picture BROSCARs, as voted on and nominated by all of your hosts here on the Reasons I'm Broke podcast, the 4th BROSCARs winner goes to...
Don't Look Up.
There you go. Majority of hosts gave it to Don't Look Up. You guys really like this one.
Yeah, it's a really strong film. I think to be honest, I think out of all the films, it has the best cast and probably the best performances of the ones everything but Last Duel that because I can't say that I've seen it, but I think that the performances, while there were some weak parts, I think it was, especially Leo. I think Leo really outacted Will Smith. Yeah, I think, Chalamet. I guess, it's hard to say Zack Snyder's Justice League, like who would be,
Ray
maybe
Fisher, but I really liked Ray Fisher too.
Yeah, well, he did a great job. Yeah, but I think Leo's performance, just the nervous kind of, it was great. It was fantastic, and his line delivery and everything like that. And Adam McKay's editing just came in clutch. Zack Snyder's Justice League is really good. I wish that it was like a more standalone movie, because I can't really say that I could, in good conscience, choose it over something like Don't Look Up, that's completely original and it's singular in nature, So I don't know, but yeah, I'm happy for all the nominees, and let the best man win.
Absolutely. It is still a huge honor, in my opinion, to be nominated on the BROSCARs. So congratulations to all nominees and to this year's winner for Don't Look Up. So if you're listening, Adam McKay and David Sirota, congratulations, and to the rest of the cast. So now we can head on over into the Brocap block, which is what Millennial Mike and I have been doing since the last time you heard us. So Mike, let's talk a little bit about that, what you brought up on some of the maybe corruption, or everyone gets a trophy, or some of the other odd awards, like
Right.
Even though I might take a look, but I know I've already seen on the other award show, the Academy Awards, that Zack Snyder's Justice League won Best Cheer Moment at the Oscars, and Army of the Dead may win Oscar for the first ever fan. But that all aside, I think you and I are both against any kind of award like that, where a popularity contest.
Big time. And I posted on the Exiles Net Twitter account, and actually I reposted it a little while ago today, being the Oscars. I felt that it was more relevant today than the commentary I was making about it preemptively. But I didn't want to see Zack Snyder's films get recognized in this way. I didn't want to see it get recognized like this. Like, I always knew that the Oscars were going to become, and have been becoming, more and more populous every year, and mostly just to attract viewers. Of course, none of those viewers actually care about the Oscars to begin with. So it's really just a downward spiral. And now that Zack Snyder's Justice League is being recognized, to cheer that work on, or his other work that may be getting recognized in the film, feels disingenuous, to the point where I'm not even really sure it's a victory. I guess if some of the people see it and, oh, that's cool, but there's so little respect, I think, amongst people for the Oscars, and so much apprehension and cynicism toward them, because they are a very duplicitous lot, to say the least, that I just think that, it just falls on deaf ears, and it also just feels like, what's the kind of award that for trying? What do you call it? It's like a
participation trophy.
Yeah, like a participation award, or like we're checking boxes that you are now included in. So it just, I didn't want to see it happen like this.
Something similar happened in the MLB, for example, in sports, and in a move to try to get ratings up as well, they've widened the amount of teams that can make it to the playoffs. So now there's, I think, 3 teams per league, from what I remember, up to 3 it could be, which is like almost over half of the teams that are included in each division. So that's one of the things where this feels like that too, where it's like, hey, your team made it to the playoffs, congratulations. But it's also like, did we though? And how is that affecting future championships now? Because a team that maybe wouldn't have won or wouldn't have made it to the playoffs might win the playoffs. And to some, that might be a great thing. But to others, it's like, okay, but is it really the best then? And that's kind of what I'm feeling with this award show too, where if you want a participation trophy, if you want a fan voted trophy or Oscar, then I think we already have like the Nickelodeon Choice Awards and some of these other award shows that are basically, quote unquote, the people's choice, where they can give them to whoever they want. And that's what I feel like when you compromise your award a little bit by having, like the Oscars did with the fan vote. And I don't know if they'll do it next year. We'll see how well this does as far as the ratings. I think they'll gauge it on that.
Yeah.
But to me, that it kind of makes the award even less prestigious in many ways. And they already made it less so when they, on their end, did almost the same thing. They did the same thing that MLB did, of now we have 10 Best Picture nominees.
Yeah. I think that I don't think that we've been drifting away from award shows and other things like that. And even other public displays and communal areas of, displaying and cheering for excellence have been wrought with a lot of controversy as of late. So I think that, just the idea that something is actually the best is, of course, I think inherently it comes with a lot of issues and a lot of road bumps and a lot of questions. Obviously, someone's going to get left out, whether that be the person who is participating in the reward show or the people that are watching it who are cheering for one thing or the other, who don't feel represented by whatever it is that's being, displayed. But I think that maybe this might be an opportunity for people like us to kind of create our own reward shows and people to be a little bit more individualist when it comes to, not caring so much about putting all their eggs in one basket, so to speak. The Oscars has had so many issues over their entire existence and it's, the issue has always changed. They've always been pretentious. They've always been stuck up, but at least they were consistent and at least they had a certain degree of integrity. And now they're both pretentious, stuck up, preachy, didactic, and they have no integrity. So yeah, it's too bad really, but more things like the BROSCARs will be really great. And just everyone kind of just celebrating the things that they care about and they like on their own. I think it'll be a positive thing in the end.
I think so too. And I do still use some of when I see consistently a movie being recognized by awards or whatever, for example, even the Oscars, I'm like, okay, I go through the HBO Max. Right now they have a special section of every year's Best Picture, and you can go through and watch it. They have them on there as part of the Criterion collection for a lot of movies, not all of them, not every year. They don't have the rights to every single one, but you can watch a ton of them. And I do watch movies that I otherwise would not have seen if it weren't for nominations, whether it's Oscars or anything else. And so I hope that people, at least I've found that I've found value in that, because if someone else on the other side says, well, I never saw The Last Duel, for example, or Don't Look Up, but it got nominated for a BROSCAR or any other thing, or someone that I know my views on movies more or less align with theirs and they enjoyed it, then I will probably check it out. Whereas normally I would not have. So there's a place for it, but I do think that the term Oscar nominated or even award winning in some ways when it comes to movies has a little bit less impact when you kind of see the direction that award shows like the Academy Awards are going in.
Yeah. It's like the box office is the reward of a pop culture blockbuster, popcorn flick. It's like, that's the reward. The money that you made. It's like the reason why we even have these things is to recognize films that perhaps pass up on, the lucrative, nature of a blockbuster film to make something more artistic, meaningful, and different. And this is a little niche carved out to allow those films to get appreciation to begin with. So now that, a film can be number one grossing in the world or whatever, and then also be like the best picture, it's like, well, I mean, I'll just look at the box office and skip the award ceremony.
Sure. See, this is great. I'm glad I have a film exile to discuss this. I'm glad you were able to do this for the BROSCARs, because we can go deep on this stuff without reservation.
Oh yeah, big time.
I love that. Outside of that, what have you been doing in your week since episode 500?
So recently, I've been buying a lot of games on Steam. I kind of got into a Final Fantasy little thing. That new Final Fantasy Origin Stranger in Paradise came out with Jack and I'm not sure if you're familiar with the franchise or whatnot, but I've been playing that quite a bit recently. It's the newest one in the franchise that's come out. It's been a lot of fun, so I've been putting a lot of hours into that. I also, while I was at it, bought Final Fantasy VII Intergrade, Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade for PC as well. That came out a while ago, and I was intending on buying it, but I'm like, you know what? I just did my taxes recently. I got a little extra skrill laying around, so
There you go.
so I'll go ahead and just double down on that. I've been playing a lot of Final Fantasy. I bought Dead Cells again. I had it on my Switch, which I've been playing a lot on there, but also now on my PC, along with all the DLC. And I've actually been streaming Dead Cells gameplay on my Discord, the Exiles Network. I've been streaming no specific times. It's not really regimented or scheduled yet. But if you ever happen to join the Discord, you'll see me on there streaming Dead Cells or maybe another game, but mostly Dead Cells. So yeah, pretty much fun.
So getting a lot of your gaming on, something that you and Scott from Lazy Gaming Guys, get your game on, get all of your, do you have a library in your collection too of like, I'll play that one day and it's like 50 games, just still shrink wrap?
Well, when I was a console player, oftentimes I would, you get a slew of exclusive games for your PlayStation. I was mostly a PlayStation guy before I switched over to PC. So I would buy a bunch of different PlayStation exclusives, or maybe I'd pick up some other games while I was out to buy the games that I knew that I wanted. I'd see something else, I'd buy that too. And then I would, I wouldn't play them all. I'd play part of the game and kind of just get tired or bored. I didn't like it as much as I thought I would. And then I'd have a bunch of other games laying around that I didn't get to. But nowadays on PC, I'm mostly playing multiplayer games with people that I know, or, just for like competitive online, like shooters and stuff like that. So I play a lot of those games that you're playing mostly for the competition. But recently with the Final Fantasy situation, because I used to I'm a big like first player, or one player story driven narrative kind of game guy. And I haven't done that in a while. So, and my favorite franchise is Final Fantasy. So recently this is actually me kind of delving back into that since I've left the PlayStation behind and consoles in general. So I would say no, not anymore. Most of my games are either online, which you can't finish those, or I'm now just buying some games that I guess that could potentially go unfinished.
Gotcha. Yeah. The only reason I ask is, I was going through my collection and I'm like, yeah, I bought that game because Scott really, really liked it. It was his favorite game of that year. And then I have the Darkstalkers collection. I'm more or less just buying games here or there that I want to support because I want to see more of in the future, even though I may not have a chance to play it. So like the Darkstalkers collection, of course, I'm voting with my dollar. It'd be cool to see a updated Darkstalkers game, a brand new one. And then same with Mario Strikers, although a bunch of the hosts on here are going to be having it, and we plan on doing like an online league. I don't know how that's going to work as far as my schedule, how much gaming time I will actually get in, but I still wanted to buy it because Mario Strikers I have great memories on, and I want to support that too. Bayonetta 3, same thing. Maybe there's a Bayonetta 4 at some point, but if not, if this is the final one, I want to tell them thank you for the last 3 games.
So you're a big Nintendo player.
I guess so. I mean, there was Darkstalkers I'm getting on the PlayStation 4. I guess I would have a lot of more Nintendo titles than anything else is as far as what I've played in the past. I used to be a big Nintendo fanboy, especially during the GameCube era. I defended that shit.
Because the GameCube was the best Nintendo console that ever came out. That's the reason.
Well, yeah, you couldn't say that shit back then. It was the worst console ever. It was so kiddie, Millennial.
Yeah. I mean,
have mature titles.
The funny thing about that is that, well, I don't think it was so much about the titles really, because the GameCube was like the height of that. At that point, they were still managing to put a lot of power on their device, which attracted developers. Although the CDs being extra small was kind of like, against that. That was going against the developers in some ways. And then of course the little square, cubish, cute little outward appearance is what kind of people I think criticize as being kiddie. The little handle box in there so you could, carry it to your friend's house and play. Well, yeah, but I would say I'd much rather have that than what we have now with the Switch, a portable, which is still the same ethos, that's the same idea. Oh, I can take it around because, I'm driving apparently in the passenger seat. It's like, no, I got a job. It's like, and I'm never going to be driving in the passenger seat ever. So I'm not going to be playing my Switch, Mario Strikers in the back, asking if we're there yet. That's not. So, yeah. And also the power on the new console is weaker. It's the weakest in comparison to its competitors that Nintendo has ever been.
And that's been the trend since the Wii U. Or I'm sorry, since the Wii.
Right. Yeah. Just down. Exactly. So developers are, while they are coming on board, I suppose, the games look terrible.
Yeah, they don't run the same, and I'm sure developers do run into some issues with the Joy-Cons and some of the development as opposed to like just mapping it out to a standard controller.
And they're old games too. Most of the games that are coming out are also been out for a while.
Yeah, the big one was Skyrim, I think, that they were making a big deal of, and that game had been out for over 5 years at that point or something.
Yeah. It's like, if you can play the game on your phone, then you shouldn't be bragging that it's on the Switch, you know?
That's true. On my end, I got to watch the Resident Evil movies. I stopped at Extinction years ago, and since then, they've released the final chapter. And I enjoyed them just fine up to that point, but I'm like, you know what? They were adding almost all of them on HBO Max except for the final chapter. I'm like, this is my opportunity right here. So I went through and I watched the one after that was, the titles are so like Afterlife and it's like they don't really mean 5 or 6 or anything like that. But I watched Afterlife. I had seen that one somewhere. I don't remember, but I was like, okay, I remember Michelle Rodriguez coming back and all of that. And then I watched the one right after that called Redemption, I believe. And then finally the final chapter I had to rent on Vudu for $3 or $4. So as I'm watching all of these, and I put it up on Discord, there's inconsistencies when you go from one to the next. Like, oh, now they're at the White House and that's where the movie ends. And then the next movie takes place and Alice is giving this retcon basically of like, my name is Alice and this is what happened. And now we're here and I'm trying to
really
stop them.
happened.
Yeah. And I'm like, what happened?
What you watched in the last movie wasn't real.
Basically.
Yeah.
And it's like, what happened at the White House? And I'm reading up the trivia and it's like, okay, well, a bunch of these actors couldn't make it. So we're just now jumping forward another 6 months.
I see.
And Wesker is depowered and all that. But all of that being said, they're solid movies. Like I like the action. I like Mila is an amazing lead.
Yeah, but she's great. I'm a big fan. Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of that goes with the fact that she's working with her husband who she met through these films. And they're putting they put their daughter in the final one. So you can tell there's a lot of heart behind these movies as they're making.
I think they finance a lot of their own films too. You know, they put a lot of their own money into, they did that with Monster Hunter.
Oh, okay. I didn't know about that one.
So yeah, it's nice to see that, you know, filmmakers like this who are, it appears as though they really are making it for the passion of doing it. And they're really putting their neck out there to make these films that are pretty large budget, comparatively speaking.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just kind of nice to see. I like that a lot. I haven't watched any of his films aside from Monster Hunter, but after seeing Monster Hunter, I have to admit he's got some chops. I think he did. It was pretty low budget, so I think that if he had more of a budget, he could have really done some things. But I was looking here very carefully to kind of see his fingerprint, you know, on the movie, and I'm like, you know what, that shot was really well done. Like, I wonder if he has more stuff like that in other films that maybe he could afford to put more money on, or they didn't really require as much, and what that would look like. So yeah, I'm interested.
Yeah, I would encourage you to check out the Resident Evils that he directed. I don't think he did all of them, but at some point he started just, all right, I'm going to do the rest of these because he did the first Mortal Kombat from the 90s, which I really like. And then he saw what happened with Annihilation, and one of his quotes, he's like, yeah, I kept coming back for these Resident Evil movies because I didn't want someone else to pull an Annihilation where basically you kill the franchise with a terrible sequel. So you could tell he really cares about when he starts something and there's sequels, he wants to see them through. And I think a lot of directors are like that too, as long as they're not just studio men of like, yeah, what do you want me to make? Okay, I'll make it. I'll be a yes man. So, and he's definitely, it seems like one of those.
Yeah.
He tried to film the last 2 movies back to back. The studio wouldn't let him. So he was like, all right. But then he followed through with the final chapter. So I've been watching those and been liking those. And I think another example of how you can successfully adapt a video game into a film. You get that a lot of kickback immediately whenever something gets announced, but now it's yet another set of movies that I can say, well, what about this? Or what about Tomb Raider? What about that? Detective Pikachu.
Well, the movies I think did pretty well. And they, as far as like the money is concerned, I think in hindsight, people were like, you know, they weren't really that great, and they didn't follow the storyline of, because like for instance, Resident Evil has like some animated movies that they make that are a lot more. I mean, basically they're just cutscenes from the movie, which I think ultimately most general audience, aka, you know, video game fans who are watching these adaptations really want. They just want to see cinematic cutscenes for 2.5 hours. So I think that, you have those if you really want to see something that's very, very quote unquote faithful. But yeah, no, these movies didn't do bad by any means. It was kind of more up to the people reviewing the movies afterwards to kind of spin it one way or the other.
But there you have it, Brocat Core. We've got your Broscars. We had a little bit of news, a lot of film discussion, especially. It almost felt like an episode of the film Exiles, didn't it? A little bit.
I need to have you on, actually. We need to do a straight up film Exiles analysis.
Oh, that'd be fun, man.
Yeah.
That'd be a lot of fun. But I do want to thank you, Millennial Mike. Film Exiles isn't your only project. Tell them about the Ronin console.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ronin Council is where we talk about all things weeb and anime and whatnot. You can find the podcast on Twitter at Ronin Council. You can find the Exiles Network as a whole at the Exiles Net on Twitter. You can find me on vero.co/Millennial Mike on Vero. And of course, you can find me on Discord. However, anyone finds anyone else on Discord.
Perfect. And there will be links in the description of today's episode as well, and where you can find Millennial Mike and his podcasts. But otherwise, if you want to join the conversation, tell a friend about the show. If you found someone that maybe didn't agree with what happened on the Oscars or any other award shows, or they might have been big fans of what got nominated this year, let them know about the Reasons I'm Broke podcast. And word of mouth is definitely what helps podcasts grow the most. It's better than reviews. It's better than links online. It is word of mouth. If you hear something from someone you trust and they recommend something, I tend to be more willing to give that a shot when I hear it from a friend or someone in my circle of people that I know that enjoy some of the same stuff I do. So if you have a second, tell a friend about the podcast. But thank you so much for joining us this week. Thank you, Millennial Mike, for making the Broscars episode possible. Thanks to the other hosts as well, Maceo, Jared, and Bobby, for voting in also on the winners and on some of these nominees. Unfortunately, they weren't able to be on this week, but Millennial Mike, as you heard, is a true, he really gets it on film as much as we all do. So you heard it already for the last hour, almost hour and a half. So thank you, Millennial Mike, again for being on, and to you on the other side for checking us out. I've been Daniel, joined by Millennial Mike and Brocat Core. All will be well. So at the time of recording this, Millennial Mike, we just got done talking about this, but it is a win, I think. Zack Snyder's Justice League won most cheer-worthy moment at the Oscars.
For the Flash scene, right?
The Flash scene. And Army of the Dead won.
Oh, it did?
Yeah, it did.
Oh.
I thought there was going to be shenanigans. Like they were going to give it to No Way Cinema, but they were legit because we know the votes were there and it won.
Yeah.
But they didn't cheese it. They gave it to him.
Wow. Okay. Well, I tell you what, it's going to be interesting because, as Snyder occultists, as Snyder Spartans, or whatever we call ourselves, we're going to be using this to put salt in the wounds of the haters and the sheep forever. And it's going to be so much fun.
You're going to hear about this next week too, because there's already some salty fucking people, salty articles coming out.
They're already written. They're just now hitting the enter button.
The most cheer-worthy moment gets no cheer in the room. It's like, oh my God, this is great.
Yeah.